The world isn't fair, and the sooner you accept this brutal, soul-shaking truth, the sooner you can stop being its victim. Right now, while you're listening to this, someone less intelligent than you is commanding more respect. Someone weaker than you is wielding more influence. Someone with fewer skills than you is living the life you want simply because they understand a darker, more truthful psychology of human nature. You've been programmed to play by rules that others broke long ago. You've been conditioned to be nice, while others are being strategic. You've been taught to wait for respect, while others are simply taking it. The game is rigged, but not in the way you think. It's not rigged by an invisible hand. It's rigged against those who refuse to learn its real rules. It's rigged against those who believe fairness exists. It's rigged against those who think good intentions matter more than psychological dominance. 500 years ago, a man named Niccolò Machiavelli, living in the political snake pit of Renaissance Italy, decoded the true mechanics of power and influence. He was a statesman, a diplomat, a political theorist, and an acute observer of human behavior. He discovered why good men so often finish last, and why ruthless strategists, men and women of cold calculation, rule the world. His writings weren't a moral guide. They were an operating manual for a world where people are not what they seem, and intentions rarely translate into results. His principles aren't about being evil. They're about being effective in a world that doesn't reward naivete. Today, I'm going to share 8 psychological principles inspired by his work. Principles that will transform you from someone who gets overlooked to someone who becomes dangerously confident, untouchable, and impossible to ignore. But I'm warning you, once you see the matrix of human psychology, you can never unsee it. Once you understand these principles, you'll never be able to play the victim again. The weight of this truth is heavy, and for some, it will feel like a betrayal of everything you've been taught. But for others, it will be the most liberating moment of your life. This isn't for the faint of heart. This is for the person who is sick of being taken for granted, who is tired of watching others succeed with half the effort, and who is ready to take back their power. I can still remember the moment my naive world came crashing down. I used to be that guy, the one with all the right answers but no one listened. I was intelligent, hardworking, and genuine, but I was also completely invisible. I watched as confident idiots got promoted over me. I saw manipulative people build empires while honest people struggled. I witnessed charismatic sociopaths attract followers while decent people ate alone. Every time I was passed over, every time my ideas were ignored, I told myself, it's just not fair. I clung to this belief like a life raft, but it was really just a flimsy piece of wood in a raging ocean. That was my first mistake. My belief in fairness was my greatest vulnerability. And then I had a sickening realization, a truth so raw and so ugly that it hurt to acknowledge it. The world doesn't reward intelligence. It rewards influence. It doesn't respect good hearts. It respects a strong presence. It doesn't care about your character. It cares about your psychological dominance. This realization didn't just destroy my naive worldview. It annihilated it. It left me with a choice: remain a frustrated victim of a rigged game, or learn the dark rules and become a player. It was a terrifying choice, but it also felt like a liberation. The chains of fairness and niceness were finally being broken. Machiavelli lived in a world of political intrigue, betrayal, and psychological warfare. He watched kingdoms rise and fall based on one simple principle: those who understand human psychology rule those who don't. His observations aren't just historical curiosities. They are operating manuals for anyone who wants to stop being manipulated and start becoming magnetic. This isn't about being cruel. It's about being psychologically sophisticated. It's about understanding that while you're playing checkers with good intentions, others are playing chess with calculated moves. And right now, you're losing. But you can learn. You can adapt. You can become the one who understands the game. Before we dive deep, I need you to do something. Write this declaration in the comments right now. A declaration to yourself. I refuse to be psychologically dominated by others. This isn't just a comment. It's your first step towards psychological sovereignty, because everything I'm about to teach you requires one fundamental shift, from victim mindset to predator mindset. Are you ready to become dangerously confident? Let's begin. Fan 2. I remember the exact moment I realized my worldview was a fairy tale. It was in my late 20s, and I was working at a tech company. On paper, I was an ideal employee. I was an engineer, a problem solver, the guy who could fix anything. I worked long hours, took on the projects no one else wanted, and genuinely believed that my good work would be recognized. I had this deeply ingrained belief that if you just kept your head down, did good work, and were a decent person, success would naturally follow. My mind was wired for fairness. I expected a meritocracy. The harder I worked, the more I believed I would be rewarded. I saw the world as a logical place where cause and effect were simple and just. But then there was Mike. Mike was the opposite of me. He was loud, charismatic, and had a knack for being in the right place at the right time. He wasn't a bad guy, not at all, but he wasn't particularly skilled at his job. In fact, he was pretty average. He'd often come to me with a problem, and I'd give him the solution, a piece of code or a technical fix. Then, in the next meeting, he'd present that solution as if he'd come up with it himself, and everyone would nod in agreement, impressed by his brilliance. I'd sit there, fuming silently, thinking, that's my work. How is he getting the credit? I was confused, and honestly, I was hurt. It just wasn't fair. I was the one doing the hard work. He was the one getting the applause. My internal monologue was a constant loop of, why not me? What am I doing wrong? I remember one specific project, a major product launch. I had been working on the core functionality for months, pulling all-nighters, obsessing over every line of code. Mike's role was more client-facing, a lot of meetings, a lot of talking. The day of the launch, the CEO came to our department. He shook Mike's hand, clapped him on the back, and said, "Mike, incredible work on this. Your leadership was instrumental." The CEO didn't even know my name. He looked right through me. It was like I was invisible. My chest tightened. A wave of sick, hot fury washed over me, followed by the cold, bitter taste of disappointment. I had done the work, but Mike had controlled the perception. He had told the story. He had made sure his presence was felt. My good intentions and hard work were a silent whisper. His strategic posturing was a megaphone. That night, I went home and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Who was this person? This angry, frustrated man who was living in the shadow of someone less capable than him. I was stuck in a loop of a victim mentality. I was waiting for someone to notice me, for someone to hand me the respect I felt I deserved. I was a passive participant in my own life, expecting the rules of fairness to magically apply to me while others were rewriting them. The anger I felt toward Mike was a cover for the shame I felt toward myself. The truth was, I wasn't the victim of Mike's success. I was the victim of my own naive beliefs. I began to see it everywhere. I saw people who were kind, but had no boundaries, and they were constantly taken advantage of. I saw people who were incredibly smart, but couldn't communicate their ideas, and they were always overlooked. I saw good, honest people struggling financially, while slick, fast-talking individuals were making a fortune. I started to see that the world didn't operate on a simple, do good, get good principle. It operated on a more brutal, more ancient, more honest set of rules. It was a world of psychological warfare, and I had been showing up to the battlefield with a white flag, thinking everyone else was playing by the same rules. I realized that Machiavelli wasn't teaching people how to be cruel. He was teaching them how to survive and thrive in a world that already was. His wisdom wasn't a guide for being a villain. It was a blueprint for not being a victim. It was about seeing the world for what it is, a place where influence and presence are the real currencies, where people judge you based on what you project, not what you are. The truth was liberating. It meant I wasn't powerless. My frustration and anger could be channeled into something productive. My invisibility wasn't a life sentence. It was a problem to be solved with new tools. I could stop being the guy who got overlooked and start becoming the guy who couldn't be ignored. I had to shed the skin of my old self, the naive, people-pleasing version of me. I had to accept that the world was not a storybook, and that I had to learn the real rules of the game if I ever wanted to win. The old me was dying, and a new, more strategic, more formidable person was about to be born. I was no longer a victim. I was a student. To understand the Machiavellian mindset, you have to throw out everything you've ever been told about what makes a person good or moral in a conventional sense. Machiavelli's world wasn't a morality play. It was a cold, harsh reality where people were driven not by ideals, but by self-interest, fear, and a desire for power. He saw the world for what it was, not what he wished it to be. And that is the very first step toward psychological sovereignty. You have to stop wishing people were different and start dealing with them as they are. This isn't about becoming a sociopath. It's about becoming a strategist. It's about understanding the game so you don't get played. Machiavelli lived in a time of constant upheaval. Political alliances shifted overnight. Your friends today could be your enemies tomorrow. Trust was a liability, and naivete was a death sentence. He wasn't some detached academic. He was in the thick of it. He saw firsthand how men who were honorable and kind were betrayed and destroyed, while those who were cunning and ruthless thrived. His famous work, The Prince, wasn't a guide to tyranny. It was a desperate, starkly realistic survival guide for a ruler who had to navigate this treacherous landscape. He was saying, "Look, this is how the world actually works. These are the tools you need to survive. Use them or be destroyed." His central thesis, the one that hit me the hardest, was that a ruler must be both a lion and a fox. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. This isn't just about political power. It's a perfect metaphor for psychological influence. A nice person is a lion without the fox's cunning. They are strong in their convictions, but easily trapped by manipulators who use emotional ploys and false promises. A cunning person without strength is a fox who can see the traps, but can't fend off the predators when they come for them. True psychological dominance requires a blend of both. You have to be shrewd enough to see the games others are playing, and strong enough to make them think twice about playing them with you. Machiavelli's lessons aren't for the person who wants to be liked. They're for the person who wants to be respected, feared, and influential. He taught that people are not naturally good. They are naturally self-interested. They will praise you when they benefit from you and turn on you the moment you are no longer useful. This isn't a cynical view. It's a realistic one. The moment I internalized this, I stopped taking things so personally. When a colleague was overly friendly, I didn't see it as a sign of genuine friendship. I saw it as a potential tactical maneuver. When someone offered a compliment, I didn't just bask in it. I asked myself, what do they want? This shift from seeing people as inherently good to seeing them as strategically self-interested was terrifying at first. It felt cold and lonely. But then, a sense of clarity and power began to emerge. I started to see the hidden motivations, the subtle power plays, the psychological chess matches that were happening all around me. A manager who made you feel like part of the inner circle was simply leveraging your desire for belonging to get more work out of you. A friend who constantly complained about their life was using their problems to get your emotional labor without ever reciprocating. I was no longer a pawn on their chessboard. I was starting to see the board itself, and with that came a profound sense of calm. The anger and frustration I felt toward people like Mike began to dissipate. He wasn't a villain. He was just a better player than me. He understood the rules I was still trying to ignore. This is the core of the Machiavellian mindset. It's an emotional discipline. It's about detaching from the emotional narrative and seeing the strategic reality. It's about understanding that every interaction is a negotiation of social power. Every conversation, every action, every inaction either increases or decreases your influence. Once you see this, you can no longer be a victim. You can't be surprised when people act in their own self-interest. You're prepared for it. You can't be disappointed when you're not rewarded for your hard work. You understand that you have to demand that reward. This isn't about becoming a bad person. It's about becoming a capable one who can protect themselves and their interests in a world that, quite frankly, doesn't care about your feelings. This is your psychological armor. Wear it. Fan 4. Here's the first brutal truth that will set you free. Fairness is a psychological trap. It's a lie sold to you by people who want you to be weak and compliant. Every time you wait for fair treatment, someone else is taking what you want. Every time you play by imaginary rules, others are rewriting the game to their advantage. Every time you expect reciprocity, the idea that if you do something for someone, they'll eventually do something for you, manipulators are exploiting your predictable behavior. You've been conditioned to believe that being fair makes you noble. In reality, it makes you prey. I can't tell you how many times I fell for this trap. In business, I'd offer a colleague help on a project, believing that when I needed something, they would be there for me. But when my time came to ask for a favor, they were suddenly too busy or conveniently disappeared. In my personal life, I would give respect to people who showed me none. I would help friends who never helped me back. I would wait for my turn while others simply cut the line, all because I believed in some unspoken, universally understood code of conduct. This wasn't because I was unlucky. This was because I was psychologically programmed to lose. I was operating on a faulty assumption. I was playing a game of chess with checkers in my hand, and I was losing every single time. Machiavelli observed, men should either be treated generously or destroyed, because they take revenge for slight injuries, for heavy ones they cannot. This isn't about physical violence. It's about psychological warfare. When you wound someone's ego slightly, they remember and plot revenge. They see you as a weak opponent they can eventually defeat. They'll gossip about you, try to undermine you, and look for opportunities to get back at you. But when you psychologically dominate them completely, they accept their position and move on. They don't have the psychological energy to fight back. They know they're outmatched. Most people make the mistake of half measures. They give weak pushback to strong personalities. They set soft boundaries with aggressive people. They try to reason with those who operate on pure self-interest. This creates the worst possible outcome. You look weak, but you also create enemies who see you as a target. They see your attempts at resistance as a sign of their own power. They know they can walk all over you because your threats are empty and your boundaries are porous. Think about it. When you tell someone, "Hey, that was a little rude," and they ignore you, what have you accomplished? You've shown them that their rudeness has no real consequence. You've taught them that they can disrespect you with impunity. Here's what psychological dominance actually looks like. When someone disrespects you, you don't argue or explain why they're wrong. You don't get emotional. You simply demonstrate through your actions that disrespecting you comes with immediate and severe social consequences. You don't negotiate with people who don't respect your worth. You don't try to convince them to treat you better. You create situations where treating you well is in their self-interest, and treating you poorly costs them something they value, whether that's your time, your social validation, or your resources. For instance, if a friend is consistently late for your plans, you don't complain about it. You just stop waiting for them. The next time you make plans, you tell them you're meeting at a specific time, and you leave at that time, with or without them. The first few times, they might not get it. But when they consistently show up to an empty table or a deserted meeting spot, they'll learn. They'll realize that your time has value and that they need to respect it if they want to remain in your life. You didn't get angry or emotional. You simply enacted a system of consequences. Stop being fair with people who aren't fair to you. Start being strategic with people who only understand power dynamics. You don't owe anyone your time, your emotional energy, or your generosity if they are not reciprocating. The moment you stop giving people an inch and start demanding what you deserve, you will notice a profound shift in how they treat you. It's not about being mean. It's about being effective. It's about taking yourself out of the victim mindset and becoming the person who sets the rules, not the person who hopes others will follow them. This is the first step toward reclaiming your power. Fan 5. This truth will absolutely shatter your people-pleasing programming. Being respected is infinitely more valuable than being liked. People have been told their whole lives that likability is the key to success. We're taught to be friendly, agreeable, and to avoid conflict at all costs. But let me ask you this. When people merely like you, what do? They take risks with your feelings because they assume you'll forgive them. They might be late, forget to call back, or make an insensitive joke at your expense. They know you won't retaliate meaningfully because you are nice. But what happens when people respect your psychological strength? They think twice before crossing you. They know there will be consequences. Likable people are safe. They're predictable. They're easy to take advantage of because everyone knows they won't retaliate meaningfully. Psychologically dominant people, however, are dangerous. They are unpredictable. They are treated with caution because everyone knows they can and will defend their interests. Think about your own life. Who gets the most respect? The nicest person in the room or the person with the strongest presence? Who do people consult before making decisions? The one who agrees with everyone or the one whose approval actually matters? Machiavelli was direct about this. It is much safer to be feared than loved if one has to lack one of the two. Now, this doesn't mean being a tyrant or a bully. It means being someone others know they cannot disrespect without facing real consequences. It means having a reputation for being fair, but formidable. It's the difference between being a doormat and a fortress. A doormat is walked all over, but a fortress is treated with reverence and caution. Here's how this works in practice. A likable person says yes to requests they don't want to fulfill because they fear disappointing others. A dominant person says no without guilt because they prioritize their own interests. A likable person accepts disrespect and hopes it will stop. A dominant person addresses disrespect immediately and decisively. A likable person tries to be included in everything, desperately seeking social validation. A dominant person is selective about what deserves their presence, making their presence a valuable commodity. The psychological shift from likability to dominance is profound, and it is uncomfortable at first. You're going to feel guilty. You're going to feel like you're being a bad person. Instead of asking, "Will they like me if I do this?" you start asking, "Will this action increase or decrease my social power?" Instead of trying to make everyone comfortable, you become comfortable with others' discomfort when it serves your interests. Instead of seeking approval, you become someone whose approval others seek. This isn't about becoming a sociopath. This is about becoming someone whose respect must be earned, rather than someone who gives respect freely to those who don't value it. I had to learn this the hard way. I used to be the guy who would go out of his way to help a friend, even if it meant sacrificing my own time and energy. I thought my generosity would be reciprocated, but instead, my friends just took it for granted. I was the reliable one, the one they could call at 2 a.m. with a problem. But when I needed them, they were nowhere to be found. They didn't respect me. They just used me. The moment I started saying no, the moment I started putting my own needs first, the dynamic changed. Some of my friends disappeared, but the ones who stayed started treating me with a newfound respect. They realized my time wasn't free. My help wasn't infinite. I had a choice, and my choice was to prioritize myself. That's when I stopped being a resource for them and started being a person they respected. Build psychological dominance through the consistent demonstration of your standards and boundaries. Let others compete for your approval instead of competing for theirs. This is a difficult path, but it's the only one that leads to genuine influence. You can be the person everyone loves to have around, or you can be the person everyone respects and takes seriously. In a world of psychological warfare, one of those is a weapon, and the other is a target. Here's where most people destroy their influence. They make weak moves repeatedly instead of strong moves rarely. Psychologically weak people constantly threaten consequences they never deliver. They give multiple warnings that train others to ignore them. They try to control through nagging, pleading, and emotional manipulation. This creates a terrible reputation. Everyone learns you're all bark and no bite. People learn to tune out your complaints because your warnings have no real power behind them. You become a source of noise, not a source of power. Psychologically dominant people operate differently. They give fewer warnings, but when they act, their actions are decisive and memorable. Machiavelli observed, "If an injury has to be done to a man, it should be so severe that his vengeance need not be feared." In psychological terms, this means when you must demonstrate your power, make it so clear and final that people understand not to test you again. This isn't about being cruel. It's about being effective. It's about teaching a lesson so profound that it sticks permanently. Let me give you a concrete example from my own life. After my mic experience, I had a new colleague. Let's call him Steve. Steve was a charming, witty guy, but he had a habit of interrupting me in meetings. Not just me, but anyone he deemed to be of lower social standing than him. I watched as he'd cut off a junior developer mid-sentence, make a quick joke, and then proceed with his own point, completely derailing the conversation. It was a classic power play. The old me would have just let it happen, fuming silently. The new me, the one learning from Machiavelli, knew that a weak response would only empower him. So, the next time it happened, when he cut me off mid-pitch, I didn't get angry. I didn't raise my voice. I simply stopped talking. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. A very, very long moment. The entire room went quiet. All eyes were on me. Then, on Steve. The tension was palpable. He finished his sentence, but his voice trailed off. He knew he had overstepped. I then looked him dead in the eye, didn't say a word about the interruption, and simply resumed my sentence exactly where I left off. As I was saying, the key feature of this new system will be, I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't ask him to stop. I used a psychologically dominant maneuver, the silent, decisive correction. I demonstrated, without a single wasted word, that he could not control the flow of the conversation, and that his disrespect would be met with an unnerving, powerful silence. After that, he never interrupted me again. The message was received. The key is that my response was disproportionately strong compared to any single incident, but proportionate to the overall pattern of disrespect. This creates psychological impact. Others see that disrespecting you has real costs. They also see that you're not someone who makes empty threats. When you act with force. This principle works in all areas of influence. Instead of constantly trying to convince people of your value, you occasionally demonstrate it so powerfully that the lesson sticks permanently. Instead of always being available and helpful, you're occasionally unavailable in a way that makes people realize they need you more than you need them. Instead of arguing your position repeatedly, you take actions that make your position undeniable. Think about the most psychologically powerful people you know. Do they constantly get into shouting matches? Do they make empty threats? No. They conserve their power. They don't engage in petty conflicts. When they do act, it's with such precision and force that the situation is resolved and a clear message is sent to everyone watching. Make fewer threats, but follow through completely when you act. Build a reputation for decisive action rather than empty warnings. This is how you stop being a victim and become a force to be reckoned with. This is the ultimate twist, the final, most devastating truth that will completely change how you see the world. Perception management is reality control. Most people naively believe that objective reality, the truth of who they are and what they've done, will eventually be recognized. They focus entirely on being good and assume others will naturally see their value. This is not only naive, it's a massive mistake. Human psychology doesn't work that way. People don't have time to investigate your character deeply. They make snap judgments based on surface signals and social proof. If you don't actively manage how others perceive you, someone else will manage it for you, and not in your favor. Machiavelli understood this completely. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. This means that for the vast majority of people you encounter, your image is your reality. Your reputation is your power. Your perceived value is your actual value in their minds. Psychologically sophisticated people understand this and actively craft their image. They control the narrative about who they are before others create that narrative for them. This isn't about being fake. It's about being strategic in how you present your authentic qualities. Think about social media. Two people accomplish the exact same thing. Say, they launch a successful business. One person strategically documents their journey, sharing stories of their competence and success. The other person says nothing, assuming their work speaks for itself. Which person gets more recognition, more opportunities, and more respect? The one who managed their perception. In face-to-face interactions, this means understanding that your body language, your voice tone, your clothing, and your social confidence all communicate your value before you say a single word. If you walk into a room with a confident posture, make eye contact, and speak with authority, people unconsciously categorize you as someone important. If you slouch, avoid eye contact, and speak tentatively, people unconsciously dismiss you as unimportant. The psychological principle is simple. People treat you according to how you train them to see you. Here's where it gets even darker and more powerful. Narrative control. This is the ultimate power move. It's controlling not just what happens, but how what happens gets interpreted and remembered. Every situation can be framed multiple ways. The same action can be seen as leadership or arrogance, confidence or selfishness, strength or aggression. The person who controls the narrative controls the meaning. Most people focus entirely on their actions and ignore the story being told about those actions. In human psychology, the story often matters more than the facts. I saw this play out with Mike and my promotion. I had the facts. I did the work. But Mike had the story. He controlled the narrative by positioning himself as the project leader, the visionary. By the time I wanted to tell my version, it was too late. The story was already cemented in everyone's mind. Machiavelli was right. Men in general judge more from appearances than from reality. People don't have time to investigate every situation thoroughly. They rely on the simplified story they hear from trusted sources. Whoever controls that story controls what people believe. This means you must become skilled at framing your actions in ways that serve your interests. When you succeed, you control the story of how you succeeded. When you fail, you control the story of what you learned. When others attack you, you control the counter-narrative. For example, if you decide to cut off a toxic friend who has been draining your energy, they might tell people you're selfish and abandoned them. If you don't control this narrative, people might see you as heartless. But if you proactively frame the story as, I had to set boundaries for my mental health and emotional well-being because they refused to respect basic friendship reciprocity, people see you as someone who values themselves appropriately. The same action, completely different perception. Advanced narrative control means anticipating how your actions will be interpreted and getting ahead of negative interpretations before they take hold. Your reputation is your most valuable asset. Protect it, cultivate it, and leverage it strategically. The moment you realize this, the entire world transforms from a stage of objective facts into a battlefield of narratives, and you will choose to be the one who writes the story. Fan. 8. Here's the final and most crucial lesson that will determine whether you remain psychologically dominated or become dangerously confident. True psychological dominance operates in silence. People who constantly talk about how tough, smart, or ruthless they are usually aren't. They're advertising what they wish they possessed, rather than demonstrating what they actually control. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. Real influence works behind the scenes. Real psychological dominance is felt rather than declared. The most dangerous people in any room are often the quietest ones. They're observing while others are performing. They're calculating while others are reacting. They're positioning while others are posturing. Think about the most psychologically powerful people you've encountered. Do they constantly remind you of their power? Do they brag about their influence? Do they threaten people who cross them? No. Their power is assumed, not announced. Their influence is demonstrated through results, not through declarations. Their dominance is felt through presence, not through words. Machiavelli captured this perfectly. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. This means you must be strategically intelligent when situations require cunning, and psychologically forceful when situations require strength. But the key is transitioning seamlessly between these modes without telegraphing your strategy. In practical terms, this means your competitors don't see your moves until it's too late to counter them. Your allies don't know how you're positioning them until they benefit from your positioning. Your enemies don't realize you're undermining them until their influence has already crumbled. Silent dominance looks like this. You work on building influence without announcing your ambitions. You position yourself strategically without making your strategy obvious. You gather information about others while revealing minimal information about yourself. You build alliances that serve your interests without making the alliance obvious to your competitors. You undermine those who work against you without them realizing the source of their declining influence. This isn't about being sneaky or dishonest. This is about understanding that strategic discretion is more powerful than tactical transparency. When you operate with silent dominance, people start experiencing your power without understanding how you acquired it. This makes your influence seem natural and inevitable, rather than calculated and aggressive. I remember a moment, long after my Mike phase, where I found myself in a different kind of situation. I was in a meeting, and someone was trying to take credit for my team's work, a classic power grab. The old me would have spoken up immediately, defending my territory. The new me did something different. I said nothing. I let them talk. I waited. And then, at the precise moment, when the other department leader asked a specific question about the technical challenges, I responded with a single, precise piece of data that only someone who had done the work would know. No explanation, no anger, just a quiet, undeniable fact. The person trying to take credit looked flustered. My boss, who was observing, looked at me with a newfound respect. I had demonstrated my ownership without a single word of conflict. My power was felt, not declared. Build your psychological empire quietly. Let others make noise while you make strategic moves. Demonstrate power through results, not through announcements. Here's the final truth that will determine whether you remain psychologically dominated or become dangerously confident. If you don't master the dark psychology of human influence, someone who has mastered it will control your life. This isn't a philosophical debate. This is psychological warfare happening around you every day. Right now, while you've been learning these principles, someone is using them against people who don't understand them. Manipulative people are exploiting those who believe in fairness. Psychologically dominant individuals are positioning themselves above those who think good intentions matter more than strategic thinking. The choice is brutal, but simple. Become someone who understands and uses psychological influence, or remain someone who gets influenced and used by others. You've been conditioned to think that learning these principles makes you bad. That's exactly what psychologically dominant people want you to believe. They want you to remain naive, predictable, and easy to manipulate, while they operate with a sophisticated understanding of human psychology. Every day you delay implementing these lessons is another day someone more ruthless is building the influence and respect you want. Every day you choose to remain nice instead of becoming strategically formidable is another day you give psychological ammunition to those who see kindness as weakness. The world doesn't need more naive, nice guys who finish last. The world needs more people who understand psychological realities and use that understanding to build lives of genuine influence and unshakable confidence. If these dark truths have awakened something in you, if you're tired of being psychologically dominated by others, then prove it. Remember what you declared in the comments. I refuse to be psychologically dominated by others. Now stop refusing and start dominating. The choice is yours, but choose quickly, because while you're deciding whether to become psychologically dangerous, dangerous people are already deciding what to do with you. The journey from a victim of psychological manipulation to a master of influence is one of the most difficult and liberating transformations a person can undergo. It requires you to shed a lifetime of ingrained beliefs in fairness, likability, and the idea that good intentions are enough. We've explored the brutal lessons of Machiavelli, that the world is a stage for psychological warfare, that fairness is a trap, that respect is more valuable than being liked, and that decisive action is the language of true power. We've learned that your reputation is your most valuable asset, and that controlling the narrative and managing perceptions are not acts of deception, but acts of reality control. Finally, we've understood that the ultimate power is silent dominance, the ability to influence others without ever having to announce your intentions. The person who understands these truths is no longer a pawn in the game of life. They become the player. This is not about becoming a bad person. It is about becoming a formidable one. It's about protecting yourself and building a life of genuine influence and respect. The world doesn't care about your feelings. It cares about your actions. The time for being naive is over. The time to become dangerously confident has begun. To continue your journey and learn more about how to apply the principles of Stoicism and psychological dominance to build an unshakable mind and an unassailable life, be sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this truth, and subscribe to the Stoic philosophy. The next video is waiting for you.
Thank you for watching this video here on the Stoic philosophy. If you found value in this, I invite you to explore more videos on the channel. There's so much more wisdom to uncover. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next one. Thanks again for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.